A warm welcome to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. Thanks for joining us this hour of World News. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz says Iran's supreme leader can no longer exist after an attack on a major hospital in southern Israel. Protesters in Los Angeles seek God's help against ICE crackdown on illegal migration in California. Plus, Kenyans stormed the Nigerian High Commission in Accra over harassment of their fellow citizens by the EFCC in Nigeria. Let's begin the world today. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz says Iran's supreme leader can no longer be allowed to exist. This after the Soroka hospital in southern Israel was hit during an Iranian missile attack. The Israeli Health Ministry says 71 people were injured in the attack this morning. On Tuesday, the Israeli Prime Minister's office said that Iranian missile strikes had killed at least 24 people and injured 592 others in Israel since the start of the conflict. Iran has rejected the report of the attack on the hospital, saying on social media platform X that Iran categorically rejects Israel's false claim that it targeted the Soroka hospital in Beersheba in Israel. It says Iran's strikes are precise and only target facilities directly involved in supporting Israel's attacks on Iran. Now, earlier, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said the blast wave of Iran targeting an Israeli military command base caused superficial damage to the hospital. Let's say a bit more now on the hospital that was hit by an Iranian airstrike in Israel. The Soroka University Medical Center is the general hospital of Beersheba, Israel. It provides services as the central hospital of the region and provides medical services to approximately 1 million residents of the south from Kiryat Gat and Ashkelon to Eilat. Iran denies targeting the hospital, saying instead it had targeted an IDF headquarters in the area during the waves of strikes on Israel overnight. The Israeli military also struck a nuclear reactor in Iran after issuing evacuation notices. A video posted online shows smoke rising from a building in the hospital. It also shows extensive damage at the top of the building, but relatively little damage to the sides, which would suggest a direct hit rather than the effect of an adjacent blast. In the meantime, Israel says the UK has not offered assistance in intercepting Iranian missiles, and the UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy is set to discuss the conflict with his US counterpart. But the UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has suggested President Donald Trump step back from military action against Iran, saying there's a real risk of escalation in the conflict.
From our initial assessment when we first arrived, it was extensive. Our police forces, because of their heightened state of alert, were able to arrive here very quickly in order to medically evacuate anybody who needed attention. I can tell you that there are just a few individuals who needed that. They were treated on the spot. Our police bomb squads went inside to remove the dangerous missile debris. But I want to point something out, that here I'm standing with you together and for the whole world to see the target of the Iranian regime, which is a hospital, but there are various other locations inside of Israel that have also been targeted, which are residential communities, houses where people live, families, and this has been the continued pattern over and over again. Regardless of that, our officers are going to continue doing everything possible to get and service our civilians wherever it is, no matter the danger. We have a few light injuries. I'm not going to get into specifics of numbers because obviously it's clear that that's a dynamic number. It can still change. There could still be somebody hidden, but that's why our forces are inside right now working in close coordination with the Home Front Command, with the medical personnel in order to service anybody and rescue anybody that needs us.
As for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel is making progress in the military operation against Iran as the Israeli army has taken control of the skies over Tehran. In a televised address, Mr. Netanyahu said Israel launched Operation Rising Lion to eliminate two existential threats, the Iranian nuclear program and ballistic missiles, stressing that his country is making progress step by step in removing these threats. The PM acknowledged that the Israeli army has suffered painful losses, but emphasized that the home front is standing strong and the state of Israel is stronger than ever. The Israeli military announced that its attacks are continuing on various targets across Tehran, while Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps confirmed it has responded with missile strikes targeting Israel. The region marks a dangerous and unprecedented escalation following Israel's Rising Lion operation early Friday, which struck nuclear facilities and military sites, killing Major General Mohammad Bagheri, Chief of Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces, and Major General Hussein Salami, Commander-in-Chief of the Revolutionary Guards, alongside several senior commanders and nuclear scientists. Israeli residents in Tel Aviv are said to be sheltering in public parking garages as Iranian strikes hit targets across the country, leaving many families displaced. Volunteers are on hand, however, distributing food and other supplies to those in need.
We have decided to convert civil and public parking places to make them real shelters, all with the approvals of the authorities. And there are very many people in Tel Aviv, for example, but also in Israel, who do not have sufficient shelters, or they don't have shelters at all. So we really provide them here, kind of a real, if you can call it in such a circumstances, environment of community. And we provide them with food, with tents, in order to have privacy. Yesterday there were, I think, around 200, something like that. But due to the fact that it was spread, so obviously there will be more and more right now, because there are very many people in other places every day during the last days. So I believe today we will have more. And right now, while I'm speaking with you, we are working regarding other premises. For example, in other place near here, a very big place. In other cities, we are beginning to do it, which means we are not discriminating any kind of region, and we are trying, to do with all the modesty our utmost in order to touch very many cities as much as we can.
I didn't sleep for 5 nights. I really need to sleep. I really hope that I will get some rest here. Yes, it's very stressful to be in a place without personal shelter and with a very, very strongly overcrowded public shelter.
Now, more foreign nationals have been evacuated from both Israel and Iran. Germany, one of the countries providing evacuation flights for citizens. Passengers arrived at Frankfurt Airport today. They said the embassy was closed for the first few days of the conflict between Israel and Iran. One of them recalled his experience seeking refuge from the bombardments in Israel, saying, "I think the worst thing was the constant feeling of fear and always having to keep an eye on a bunker in such a shelter. No matter where you are, you always have to." Another described the atmosphere in Tel Aviv's bomb shelters as relaxed, condemning locals for their response to the ongoing crisis in Gaza. Meanwhile, the first group of Indian students repatriated from Iran arrived Delhi on Wednesday as tensions in the region continue to escalate amid the ongoing conflict with Israel. In the Indira Gandhi International Airport, passengers were seen arriving in the early hours with embraces from tearful relatives. A journey routed through Armenia was coordinated by the Indian Embassy as part of the government's evacuation effort. Despite the volatile situation in the region, several students expressed their desire to return to Iran and continue their studies once the conflict subsides. The evacuation of Indian nationals follows Israel's launch of Operation Rising Lion, targeting Iranian nuclear facilities and senior officials within the Revolutionary Guard.
The situation in Iran is not devastating, not normal. It's, I think, mild. We saw some drones and injured people, and we were very scared and terrified, and we came here safely in good hands, and we are very happy to be here. A great salute to Indian government. They carried out a very big mission, impossible mission. Uh, they took us from Armenia to here, and we are very glad. Uh, I can see my family, I can meet them. Iran took a very big step fighting Israel. So they should fight Israel. They should pay them back. They should carry out some missions like Israel did, and they should pay them back by doing some big events.
Coming up after the break. We'll have more on the Iran situation, but the U.S. having to cut developmental aid. We'll look at the impact for countries around the world. Stay with us. Welcome back to The World Today. U.S. President Donald Trump has reportedly approved plans to attack Iran, but has not made a final decision on whether to use them. An intelligence source says the U.S. president held off from strikes in case Iran agreed to abandon its nuclear program. Trump is reportedly considering strikes on the underground uranium enrichment facility at Fordo. Trump said on Truth Social earlier today, the Wall Street Journal, which carried a similar report, had no idea what my thoughts are concerning Iran. He did not address whether plans had been approved. Speculation mounted about Trump's intentions on Wednesday after Iran's supreme leader, the Ali Khamenei, rejected his demand for surrender. Reactions in the United States over the Israel-Iran airstrikes. Demonstrators rallying outside the White House in Washington, D.C. This happened Wednesday, holding signs reading "No New War in the Middle East" and the ongoing Israel-Iran conflict. Activists also waved Palestinian and Iranian flags, chanting, "We don't want your racist war." Counter-protesters and police were also seen nearby. The Israel-Iran conflict enters its 7th consecutive day today after Israel launched strikes on Iranian nuclear sites and other targets, and Iran responded with waves of missile strikes. Congress President Donald Trump says he's considering striking Iran himself, but has not come to a decision. He's reiterated that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, despite the IAEA and even his own director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, saying that they have not seen evidence of Iran's nuclear weapons.
Occupation no more. Occupation no more. We will not be pushed aside. We stand by us side by side. Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine. Free, free, free Palestine.
Let's bring in our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird, now to talk some more about this. Maria, let's just begin with those protests in Washington, and why they felt the need to go outside of the White House.
Well, yes, you're correct. These protesters are right outside of the White House. And that is typical when we see this type of dissension within the American people. And so the White House obviously is where the president is. It's expected that he's probably in there. And so they are hoping to get some sort of a movement and maybe even a change of heart. But we know that the president has been going between whether or not the U.S. is going to play part in the military action with this war. And additionally, the president has also stated that he is hoping for a resolution. But American people obviously are a bit concerned about this. This is something that, as you can see, some are out even protesting against.
I did wonder about that, how the American people are, receiving these mixed messages from President Donald Trump. I mean, he says, nobody knows what I'm going to do. I may or may not, join the Israeli strikes. How are they reacting to this?
Well, I think the U.S. government at this time has not given the American people a clear indication whether or not they'll be able to join the strikes. And what this actually does for many Americans, it brings concern. We know that foreign relations, and we know that the entire world right now is in some sort of a challenging point. We're seeing more wars than we've seen in recent history. And so, and America has continued to be one of the frontline members as it relates to negotiations, even from the Biden administration, when you think about Ukraine and Russia. But the concern now is not only the financial support that's been provided across the globe, and actually now looking at how the president plans to provide resources with this Middle East crisis. But this is furthermore, I think that where Americans are standing is not wanting to create any potential harm to the land here, making sure that the United States is clear from any potential attacks. And I think that is the greatest concern by many Americans. And some Americans have had concern around the nuclear weaponry and the actual affairs of Iran for quite some time. But they're not sure if the president's actions are one that we want to move forward with. So that's, I think, where you're seeing concern is really about how the U.S. is protected moving forward.
And what Iran's response will be, because Iran does have on its side Russia and North Korea, which both have nuclear weapons to assist Iran should it decide to go into this war with the United States. And just as the president talks about U.S. participation, what is that sounding like? Because I think to many Americans, this will mean putting boots on the ground in Iran eventually.
It could be. I mean, we know that we heard very early on about the president's calls and he even leaving the G7 summit early because of what he said, the role of the United States in being able to bring peace. But if we're talking about boots on the ground, we know what we saw during the Iraq war. We know what we saw when the U.S. spent almost 20 years in the Middle East on boots on the ground. I'm not sure if America is ready for that and willing to kind of see that type of boots on the ground again. And so as we look at the military has also decreased in number. We don't have the same number of individuals to have those boots on the ground. As you mentioned earlier, the nuclear weaponry, the risk of doing something of that nature. And the U.S. is prepared to be able to take that sort of a stand within what many might consider the United States a potential crisis that is not involving the United States. We are calling for a resolution, but it's not directly impacting the United States. So there's quite a few pieces to put together here. But as we know, the president has stated that the U.S. is looking at potential airstrikes. We have not seen any clear indications that that is going to happen. But again, we are just watching as the president continues to provide further insights into how his administration will move forward.
How would this be a win for President Donald Trump? I mean, many Americans are noticing, and I think even some of his supporters who do speak on television are noting that the president is deviating from the promises he made to the American people before he was elected president. And this war that he's intending to go into with Israel, on the side of Israel, beg your pardon, against Iran, is a deviation from the promises he made to them.
Yes, I think that the American people, to your point, are watching to see exactly what the president said during his campaign. The only challenge here is that I think the president, as you talked about, what are the wins for him? Armed and weaponry and nuclear reduction and those type of challenges has been a focal point for the United States for quite some time. He was hoping that he could potentially find a way to kind of put a decrease and to potentially reduce the risk of any type of nuclear weaponry, nuclear bomb threats, things of that nature that have definitely been a concern of the United States and been on the watch list, to be very honest, for the United States for quite some time now. So his hope was that he could come in potentially come in and address the issue, have Iran comply, as you heard him mention earlier in the week, to surrender. But we see that that has not been the response that have been received from Iran. And so the concern, I think, from the American people is not wanting to can create any further challenge for Americans and potentially have any type of full-out war to outbreak.
Maria, the president did hold a military parade on Saturday to mark the U.S. Army's 250th anniversary as well as his 79th birthday. And we did see videos of some of the tanks that the American military or army does possess. But of course, we didn't see the more complicated ones, but the ones that made it to the parade. And then, it really wasn't, a huge thing as the president had wanted it to be. But wouldn't that be a message the U.S. president could be sending out perhaps to other countries as well? And I think that probably was his intention, to make sure that other countries are afraid of the United States. But in the era that we're in, this war with Iran, wasn't that a dangerous move? Or, I don't know, a bit complicated, I guess, for the U.S.?
Well, it was unprecedented. As we know, he went to France a few years ago during his first administration and saw this type of parade. And so he always asked for one. And so that is exactly what's happened during his second term administration. And as you mentioned, it was really about showing the force and potential military capacity of the United States. Now, I'm not sure if he thought that this would be potentially charging to Iran or kind of potentially creating further conflict. I think that it was more so, as you said, to show the strength of the United States. And so this was what he's been asking for, what he's wanted. Obviously, we know that he definitely operates and leads by showing strength. And so this is what was his focal point. We've never had this type of parade before in the United States, and specifically in Washington, to have those large tankers and so many military personnel parading through the capital of the United States was definitely a new event for Washington.
Supreme Leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, has said Iran will not surrender. And we did read President Donald Trump's tweet a few days ago about the U.S. knowing where exactly the Ayatollah is, and he could be taken out, but he will not be for now. Just wondering, Maria, if that will be if he will be a major target for the United States, should the president eventually announce his plan to go into this war against Iran?
Yes, so that has been the focal point. I think even before further announcement, the U.S. has been watching to see where the Supreme Leader is located, has stated before that they are able to identify where he potentially could be. And so that will be probably the first order. If the U.S. does decide, the president does state that the U.S. is going to be engaging potentially in what could be a war. But that, I think, is still a little bit down the road here. I think Americans are hopeful that some sort of resolution can happen before the U.S. has to take some type of boots on the ground approach.
Maria, finally, how are the American media, making this fine dance between, having to report exactly what is going on and then not giving too much information about what could potentially harm the United States as regards this war between Israel and Iran?
Well, the American media is, I think, much as most people are at this time, trying to, as you said, connect the dots. There's movement, and we've seen him speak yesterday. It was the new flag was put up at the White House. The president spoke there about the fact that it's late, but it's never too late. And so they're trying to figure out, well, what does that mean? Does that mean we're still talking negotiations, or are we talking some type of airstrikes? We've seen the social media post and some of what he's put out through social entities, which has led to maybe potentially some further military action on the part of the United States. And so as these tea leaves are dropped and people are trying to connect the dots here, I think the president's administration, if we really look at how he's operated historically, are hopeful that this will lead to potentially some sort of resolution before any further military action has to go forth.
Thanks again, Maria. I think it's safe to say, do stay safe in Washington. Let's turn now to the anti-ICE protests in the city of Los Angeles in California, taking on a more spiritual dimension now. Hundreds joined the prayer walk for family unity on Wednesday, demanding cessation of the Trump administration's ongoing crackdown on illegal immigration. They marched from LA Placita Church to federal buildings near the temporary ICE detention center. March participants were spotted carrying flowers and banners bearing "Families are sacred" and chanting "Immigrants are welcome here." Protesters accused ICE workers of not identifying themselves during detentions, making it look similar to abductions in plain and broad daylight. The protest began last Friday in response to a series of immigration and customs enforcement raids carried out as part of the administration's broader immigration policy. Tensions grew over the weekend with dozens of people detained. The Los Angeles Police Department declared downtown an area of unlawful assembly following 3 consecutive days of unrest.
Across from a school and a donut shop, masked agents screeched to a halt, exited 2 unmasked cars, and began sprinting after 5 men simply waiting for the bus. One of the agents pulled a gun and aimed it at a clergy leader who was present. This is unacceptable in Pasadena and anywhere in America. And so tonight, may our prayers be joined with the prayers of our siblings in Pasadena right now and others who we know are standing in solidarity with us.
They can't go to work or get their groceries. These are abductions in plain and broad daylight, and they are terrorizing our families and our cities. I witnessed it myself as this made its way to my own church. The people who are doing this are refusing to identify themselves. They are swift, fully armed, and their purpose is to instill fear, to force everyone to comply, to stand back, and to accept this as the new normal.
And we say we're talking about immigration policy, when the story is really about people doing the jobs U.S. companies have given them, putting food on their table, taking care of their sacred families and communities, and paying their taxes, doing the best they can to get through their day. Holy One, everyone our government has seized in these cruel workplace raids has someone waiting at home tonight for the news that most of us take for granted, that the people we love and depend on are okay, and that they're coming home soon.
Meanwhile, the United States' aid to countries plagued with food insecurity is coming to a halt as the impact of budget cuts that were made a few months ago are beginning to have an adverse effect on food supply in many countries. Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird has more on how food supplies are almost out of resources.
Manna Nutrition, a nonprofit agency in the U.S., says it has helped over 10 million children across the globe, and their life-saving peanut-based nutrition packets are in jeopardy as the United States has experienced funding cuts in the Agency for International Development.
If this plant goes away, then you're talking about a lot of death, a lot of kids losing their lives.
USAID accounted for about 90% of the nonprofit's budget to produce the food packets. The recent cuts by DOGE, which was recently managed by Elon Musk, didn't explain the reason for cuts, other than the funding was not in alignment with national interest.
If we lose USAID as a funder, they're the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Without them, global food aid will grind to a halt. If I were a normal person, I would say we're in trouble. We're in trouble already. But we haven't laid anybody off yet. We haven't shut down yet. We're running right now as we stand here. And for that regard, we're good through August with no more orders. At that point, we have to figure out, what are we going to do?
One employee at the plant believes that the life-saving work will continue.
When you're doing good work, The Lord always makes sure you can continue to do it. So if you're doing his work, and which I believe we are, then he's going to make sure that maybe a little rough spots going on, but I think we're going to be fine.
This nonprofit that has saved millions of lives across the globe through providing ready-to-use food packets will have to make cuts to workforce and production if funding sources from USAID or another source are not in place by August. From Washington, Maria Bird, Channel Television News.
We're not quite done yet with Maria. The United States has experienced what the federal government is calling a political assassination. While the U.S. politicians have detailed security, it appears as if the gunman in the Minnesota shooting was still able to stalk several politicians and kill one of them. Police now have Vance Bolter in custody. Maria has developments on the story.
U.S. experienced a string of tragedies over the weekend as two Minnesota senators and their spouses were shot by suspected gunman Vance Bolter. Democratic State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband were fatally shot Saturday at their home after he wounded Democratic State Senator John Hoffman and his wife at their home.
There was an original call in the city of Champlin where there was an individual that had shot Senator Hoffman and his wife. At approximately 3:35, another call came in when it was officers proactively checking because they knew of the incident that occurred, and they were going to check on Speaker Hortman at that time, at which time Brooklyn Park police officers encountered the individual who immediately fired at them, and they exchanged gunfire, and then the individual was able to escape during that exchange of gunfire.
The gunman was arrested Sunday after what a local police chief called the largest manhunt in the state's history. Bolter, the 57-year-old suspect, is charged with 2 counts of each of second-degree murder and second-degree attempted murder. The governor of Minnesota and former Democratic candidate for vice president Tim Walz announced the arrest of the gunman.
Law enforcement have apprehended Vance Bolter. That's 48 hours that law enforcement involved in a complex and dangerous manhunt. Spent Father's Day away from their families to deliver justice for Melissa and Mark Hortman and their children who spent this Father's Day alone. To the law enforcement who stand here and the hundreds who are involved in this, the state of Minnesota owes you a deep debt of gratitude. Thank you. Multiple agencies were there as FBI laid hands on it and Minnesota State Patrol put the handcuffs on. One man's unthinkable actions have altered the state of Minnesota. Melissa Hortman was the core of who our values were. She had a hand in so many things that happened. The building that we stand in, she helped usher through so that we could respond from the State Emergency Operations Center with the professionalism and giving the tools necessary to law enforcement to do their job. To Melissa and Mark's family, I cannot fathom your pain and the grief that you're going through. To John and Yvette Hoffman, the latest news is Senator Hoffman came out of his final surgery and is moving towards recovery.
While the U.S. president was very busy this weekend with the 250th birthday of the Army and his own 79th birthday celebrations, he shared this statement regarding the shooting.
Absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. And they're looking for that particular man right now. Thank you.
The U.S. has been plagued with gun violence, and political tension in the U.S. has increased. It is suspected that these shootings directly linked to a manifesto by the gunman. Later Monday afternoon, the suspect will appear in court. From Washington, Maria Bird, Channel Television News.
Retired American military officers have joined in efforts to deliver a stream of food-stuffed sacks over a town emptied by fighting in South Sudan. This happened last week. It was the latest airdrop in a controversial development. Private contracting firms led by former U.S. intelligence officers and military veterans delivering aid to some of the world's deadliest conflict zones in operations organized with governments that are competent in the conflicts.
We're in the middle of the rainy season in Africa, and the rainy season, it makes the overland truck delivery unreachable in a number of places. And because these civilians have been displaced due to the internal conflict going on within South Sudan, the river is unpredictable in deliveries by barge. Trucks can't reach these remote villages, so airdrop is the only option.
At least like Oxfam, and I know I can speak, I'm sure for the most part of the principled humanitarian community, is that we cannot accept military or profit-driven intermediaries overriding principled aid delivery. We just cannot. It goes against everything we believe in and we've signed up for and that we are accountable to and that we're, binded by.
My name's Mick Mulroy, and I'm the president of Fogbo, which is a company, a private company, that works to enable humanitarian operations around the world. We do so by using the experience that we had, many of us in the military, but we also have people that served in the United Nations. We think we add value because we've worked for careers collectively in conflict zones, and we know how to essentially make very difficult situations work.
That is not humanitarian aid, and that's not what humanitarian means. Giving a party to the conflict the power over who receives the aid and where and from whom, it turns this aid and this relief into a tool of coercion. And it blurs the line between humanitarian assistance and military objectives, which puts basically civilians directly, and also the humanitarian workers, at serious risk and weaken all of the protections that we as humanitarians are guaranteed under international law.
The plan for this project is to take up to 600 metric tons to drop them in Upper Nile. So far we've dropped 256 metric tons, and we still have a long way to go. Maybe 2 weeks will be able to be done. The fact that now we have 2 aircrafts on the ground, we can be able to expedite this in 2 weeks.
Germany has just celebrated its first Veterans Day, an unprecedented act of respect and appreciation in a country which has been reluctant to embrace its armed forces and the idea of militarism in general since World War II due to the legacy of the Nazis. For more now, we're joined by the Deutsche Welle's Arthur Sullivan from Berlin. Arthur, great to see you. What exactly happened at Veterans Day and why is this such a big deal?
Well, so this was an event organised by the German government to celebrate its military veterans, and it's the first celebration of its kind since World War II ended 80 years ago, as you just said. Now, that in itself goes a long way to explaining why it's a big deal. The event itself, there were events all over the country, but the main one was here in Berlin. It was a civic celebration outside the National Parliament. And the aim was not to have a big sort of, show of military power. It was to create a festival atmosphere with a stage program, food trucks, family activities, that kind of thing. There was also an effort to try and provide information to veterans. So there was a veterans village with different stands providing information on everything from social clubs they can join to healthcare, financial supports, and also information on where to access support in the case of post-traumatic stress disorders. And as I said, worth noting here, there was no big displays of military power. The organisers were keen to avoid that. There were no tanks, no fighter jets, no marching columns. This event was first and foremost part of a process of building respect and normality around Germany's military.
And was there much opposition to the event, and what are the main reasons?
There were some small protests on the day from those who fundamentally opposed the idea. That was mostly an alliance of different left-wing groups who criticise what they see as the glorification of Germany's armed forces. The Left Party, that's a political party which won almost 10% of the vote in the last general election here. It also held a counter-event. It's strongly opposed to this kind of anything that they see as pro-military. But regardless of the size of these protests, we should say that there is considerable scepticism and perhaps opposition to militarism of any kind in Germany, and anything even hinting at it. The thing is, this event marks a really historic shift in a nation where anything that could be viewed as a display of militarism was for years seen as taboo. Now, that's all because of World War II, obviously, and the devastating legacy of Nazi rule, the Holocaust, in which at least 6 million Jews were murdered and many more minorities persecuted and murdered. So the idea of celebrating the German army and its veterans in the decades after the war was simply a non-runner. And even the term veteran for years in Germany was specifically associated with the Wehrmacht, the Wehrmacht, the army during the Nazi period. And so all that history as well led to the establishment of a pacifist movement in Germany. So there's a strong opposition to militarism here generally.
Arthur, this is a period of big change for Germany's military. I'm sure you'd agree. Why does the government see an event like this as necessary?
Well, I think this is the key point here with all of this. So when Russia invaded Ukraine 3 years ago, many across Europe and especially here in Germany woke up to the need to strengthen defence. The former German Chancellor Olaf Scholz gave a famous speech at this point. He spoke of a historic turning point. And that rhetoric has gradually been followed up by his government and also the current government with major investment, billions and billions of euros in the armed forces, long overdue. And this realisation, this awareness of this new era of Russian aggression in Europe has led to a new appreciation of the importance of the military in Germany and the need to have a stronger one. There is also a more long-term change, I think, in views regarding the German military, and that's based on their activities, most specifically in Afghanistan. So almost 100,000 German soldiers took part in the US-led war in Afghanistan for almost 20 years. Now, their role was supposed to be peacekeeping, but the nature of that conflict meant that their role morphed into a combat operation, and 59 German soldiers died there. So it was mostly those veterans from Afghanistan who wanted greater recognition for themselves and for their fallen comrades, and that recognition has now come about as a result of these changed circumstances in Europe. And that really is the final key point here. Germany needs soldiers, lots of them. It needs at least 60,000, according to the country's defence minister. And in order to attract those new recruits, the military has to be seen as more palatable, more respectable, more attractive. And that's another huge driver behind this event.
I think most countries would also want that. Arthur, thank you again for speaking with us. We're off on a second break on The World Today. Still ahead. Free noodles for your loneliness. South Korea explores a wholesome approach to guiding people on the right path. Stay with us. Welcome back. Hurricane Eric is headed towards Mexico, and Acapulco residents are preparing for lockdown as it nears the Pacific coast, prompting the activation of emergency response measures by local authorities. Business owners were seen on Wednesday boarding up businesses. Meanwhile, locals were also seen stockpiling emergency supplies as they brace themselves for the Category 3 storm. Mexico's National Meteorological Service has urged the population take shelter before 6 p.m. Wednesday, as wind speeds are forecast to reach 185 kilometers per hour, with gusts potentially surging to 220 kilometers per hour. One of the most serious threats is a storm surge, which could cause dangerous flooding in coastal areas where the hurricane is projected to make landfall on Thursday. Powerful waves and strong currents are also expected, making shorelines extremely dangerous. Meteorologists also warned that between Wednesday and Thursday, rainfall could surpass 400 millimeters, more than double the region's monthly average. Narendra Modi has become the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Croatia, where he was warmly received by his counterpart Prime Minister Andrej Plenković. During the meeting, the two prime ministers signed a series of agreements aimed at expanding bilateral cooperation across a wide range of sectors, including trade, innovation, defense, ports, and shipping, science and technology, cultural exchange, and workforce mobility. The talks marked a significant opening of the Indian market to Croatian companies. Academic collaboration between institutions in both countries is growing, and cooperation in space technologies is also underway. Plenković highlighted the historical significance of the visit, noting that this marks the first time an Indian Prime Minister has visited Croatia.
This is the first.
Meanwhile, Thai Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatра's coalition government is on the brink of collapse after a phone call between her and former Cambodian leader Hun Sen about a festering border dispute that was leaked. The leak provoked public anger and prompted a key coalition partner of the 38-year-old Paetongtarn's Po Thai party to quit. And when the call, she addressed Hun Sen, a family friend and senior politician in the Southeast Asian region, as uncle, and appeared to dismiss a Thai military commander. The second largest party in Pentagon's ruling coalition quit the alliance on Wednesday, dealing a major blow to her party's position in parliament. Her coalition now stands and holds a slim majority, which will be lost if more of its partners decide to leave. Two other coalition partners will meet later today to discuss the situation. Well, here in Africa, a group of Ghanaians have stormed the Nigerian High Commission at Roman Bridge, Accra, to protest what they describe as harassment, intimidation, and repeated violations of the rights of their fellow citizens living in Nigeria by the Nigerian police and the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. The Concerned Citizens for Economic Justice and Freedom protesters say there is need for diplomatic intervention to ensure the Ghanaian businesses are protected in Nigeria. The convener, James Clark, says the body is calling on the President, Bola Tinubu, and the Ghanaian President, John Mahama, as he condemns what he describes as targeted attacks on Ghanaian businesses operating here in the country. And in Kenya, protests continued in Nairobi Wednesday as citizens took to the streets to express their dissent during a wave of demonstrations which denounced the violence targeted at demonstrators. This comes shortly after a street vendor was allegedly shot by law enforcement. He is in critical condition at the Kenyatta National Hospital. The protest, which held at the hospital where students of the university rallied at the facility, police were seen at the site. Protesters have also been demanding the resignation of President William Ruto, as well as demonstrations being held in peace, for demonstrations to be held in peace instead of violence by the police.
I was shot two bullets, one at the arm, another one at the neck. I want to tell William Ruto that no amount of threats will threaten us. No amount of intimidation will intimidate us. The streets belongs to the people and will be to the streets until you get out of power.
One time. And so we are demanding that tomorrow's demonstrations be peaceful, be massive, until we get accountability for all the excesses that have been unleashed upon us by the regime of William Ruto.
An object believed to be a bullet was removed. The patient thereafter was transferred to the intensive care unit, where he is being cared for up to this moment. While his condition is critically ill, he is alive and is under close round-the-clock observation and care by our dedicated medical team. In total, ladies and gentlemen, we received 16 casualties in our accident and emergency center yesterday from the demonstrations. The injuries that were described ranged from gunshot wounds to blunt trauma.
Well, there's nothing like some soul food to boost your mood and solve your loneliness. For the South Koreans, soul food will be a bowl of hot, delicious noodles. The country has launched a unique initiative to address the rising loneliness and isolation among its population, enjoying free instant noodles while receiving counsel. You can get such services at the Seoul Mayom convenience stores, a program currently available only in Seoul, the South Korean capital. It allows individuals to drop in for a simple meal and mental health support in convenience store-like environment. These stores blend a mental health center with a cafe, providing anonymous support, connection, discussion, and relaxation. A 24-hour support hotline is also available. The Seoul Metropolitan Government has invested over 450 billion won, that's $330 billion US, in a 5-year initiative aimed at reducing loneliness, as more than 35% of households now consist of people living alone. The number of lonely deaths in South Korea, where individuals die by suicide or illness after prolonged social isolation, rose from 3,378 in 2021 to 3,661 in 2023. And finally, a 9-year-old archer from southeastern China is galloping his way into the spotlight as he shows off his skills of hitting targets while mounted on a horse. His father, Liu Kun, says his son has thrived under his guidance in these disciplines, explaining he began training at the age of 4.5 and has been practicing for 5 years. At the age of 6, he started competing in show jumping events, winning several championships and runner-up titles along with other minor placements. We recently got to see Leo perform horse jumping as well as shooting arrows while on a horseback as he trained, I guess, for the next event. His major challenge, however, is having a disobedient horse or adapted to unfamiliar competition venues, but is able to overcome them as long as he stays focused, shooting those arrows on horseback and intriguing thousands on social media. Look at him looking so regal on that horse. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Uvani.